Yo, a politician in this giant country just went on the most bullish rant of all time. And we're going to play the clip for you guys. But before we do that, I do want to introduce my legendary co-host who's always optimistic, Optimus Fields. And of course, we have the CEO of Primal joining us today in the house, Miljan. I nailed the name. I practice it. Thank you so much for joining us. But anyways, guys, let's straight into the clip. This has been making rounds on X, and essentially it's AI translated, and it's a French politician making a rant or speech to the bureaucracy in Europe, to the European Parliament. Let's check it out.
3 years ago, across the Atlantic, the president of El Salvador decided to invest in Bitcoin for his country. At the time, he was ridiculed by the political class and the IMF. He now shows a 100% return, with hundreds of millions of dollars available for his people, for security, and for the sovereignty of his country. The whole world is now getting ready to take advantage of this revolution in decentralized finance. Donald Trump is going to create a strategic reserve of Bitcoin for the United States. Jerome Powell, the chairman of the US Federal Reserve, is now talking about digital gold. Bitcoin is skyrocketing. And what about the European Union? What is the European Union doing? It's squandering our money on unbelievable waste. It continues to accumulate tragically inflationary deficits. It insists on regulating, taxing, and holding back. It's time to change the paradigm. It's time to protect our people from inflation and the poor economic choices of our states. It's time to say no to the totalitarian temptations of the European Central Bank, which wants to impose a fully controlled digital euro. We don't want this dystopian world where a European bureaucrat could tomorrow ban us from certain transactions and even kick us out of the banking system with a click, just for something we said on social media or for an opinion that doesn't sit well. It's time to bet on freedom. It's time for our states to invest in Bitcoin to build national strategic reserves. It's time to develop the mining industry. We, the French, hold the cards with our nuclear advantage. Let's stop taxing cryptocurrency holders more and more. It's their intelligence, their risks, their sleepless nights that have built their savings. Let's allow them to protect themselves from the crazy spiral you've created. Public deficit that drives money creation, which creates inflation, leading to chaos. Let's dare to be free. Let's stop being afraid of our own shadow. Let's stay true to the ambition of our civilization. Thank you.
I mean, wow. And then this comes, a week after, essentially, we're in French Parliament. So this is European Parliament. And then in French Parliament, they're essentially talking about the idea of taxing unrealized gains on Bitcoin. But essentially for the last, couple of months or so, we got a lot of heat from it from the Bitcoin community because inherently Bitcoiners just don't like the state, don't like government. But we've been saying elections have consequences. And the reason that this speech happened the way it did was because, again, the game theory is playing out. Russia, you hear Putin basically announcing, hey, we can't ban this thing. A week later, you have the Duma, which is the equivalent of the House of Representatives here in the United States. You have a politician there introducing legislation to make a strategic Bitcoin reserve in Russia. Morocco unbanned it. In the United States, the state governments are fighting the federal government to see who is going to implement the strategic Bitcoin reserve first. You have Jack Mallers. We played you a clip of him yesterday slipping on Tim Pool, basically saying that, Trump might sign this by executive action on day one, right? And then you're looking at it, and that creates the game theory, that creates incentives. And all of a sudden, Europe's caught in a position. We also had this German politician as well, and she gave a great speech at Bitcoin Amsterdam, where she's basically saying, look, if Trump is right about this thing, we're not going to have a choice or we get left behind. But what I love about this particular speech that this French politician made, first, it was translated to English, which really helps us. Thank you. And number two, I'll say is that is a shattering of the Overton window. Those are all topics that specifically in the European Union are not talked about, right? It's never the central bank's fault. It's workers asking for more salary. It's the supply chains. It's the war. What are you talking about? We don't do inflation. Of course not. The central bank is a good thing. I love that part. The second part that I loved, she brought up central bank digital currencies, and she brought up the dangers of central bank digital currencies. And if you guys have been paying attention for the last couple of months or so, they have been hammering. There's a new video, a short video that this European Central Bank is posting every other week, talking about how excited they are about the digital euro and all the problems that it's going to solve. And she brought up, she not only brought up the fact that no, it's just because you changed the name and you took central bank digital currency out of it, the digital euro is still the central bank digital currency. And then she brought up the potential dangers of implementing a central bank digital currency, which none of those institutions ever brought up. And the last thing I'll say before I pass it on is like, look, the dunk on the IMF and the dunk on the media because of the criticism that they had for El Salvador. Me and Opti were there. We were covering it the day the news were breaking. They were getting attacked left and right. El Salvador is not necessarily a wealthy country. It's a very small country in Central America. And all of a sudden you have the largest media institutions in the world attacking this country because they decided to make Bitcoin legal tender. And you're looking at it, it's like, why does it matter? Well, it matters because if it works in El Salvador, now developing countries and developing nations have an alternative method to the IMF. And that's what it boils down to. So the fact that the Overton window is shifting this radically so quickly, I think is a huge win for the freedom movement in general. And it's a huge win for Bitcoin in general. And I suspect this trend is not going to slow down. It's going to accelerate, if anything. And one of the awesome things about this whole thing is that because it's a grassroots movement. It's a bottom up movement. You see that the Bitcoin, and Kaiser was talking about this morning on X. You see the Bitcoin mind virus spreading. You see more and more people taking the orange pill, and they're saying like, you know what? There's a better way to the central bank, right? And the central bank really doesn't have a response to that. They don't really have an answer to that because they've been essentially relying on the fact that people don't know the truth about inflation for the longest time. And Bitcoin shines a light of truth on inflation every single day. TikTok next block that Bitcoin continues to operate. It proves that money can exist without inflation. And they don't have a response to that. They don't have a good reasoning to that. They don't have an explanation to that, right? Because we have to talk about it. Inflation is a tax, number one. Inflation is a tax because the government is overspending. And inflation is a tax on the people that need money the most because it's the lower and middle classes that get affected by inflation the most because they don't have the means to save in assets. So they get disproportionately taxed and disproportionately hurt. Simultaneously, we're getting lectured by politicians about how we need to tax the rich and how things are unfair. Like, you know, while they are, I would say inflation and central bank are the biggest causes of wealth inequality, the biggest the biggest causes of people not being able to afford things, not being able to afford food, not being able to afford homes. So it's time for a solution that's outside of the system. We've tried the system for a very long time, and I think it's time to try something new. Anyways, I'm going to pass it on to, I'm going to say Miljan. How do I say it? That I totally
Miljan, bro.
You nailed
said
it
good.
first try, and then now you butchered it.
I mean, I would just go on this rant, and it just slips my mind. So, Miljan,
it's all good.
what is your take, brother, on this? It sounded like a Bitcoiner was making this speech, man. What's your take?
Yeah, it does sound like that lady's a Bitcoiner. And thanks for having me on the show, guys. It's great to be here. Yeah, you are right. The Overton window is shifting, and it's glorious to see these types of things. And it sounded like that lady got a bit of an applause there from other parliament members there. That's the European Parliament where all of it this took place. So she's not the only one who thinks like that over there, obviously. That's very interesting. But what's even more interesting to me is that this entire game theory, the Bitcoin game theory that you mentioned, that's unfolding in front of our eyes, has been predicted by Bitcoin thinkers many years ago, more than a decade ago. I think back in 2012, 2013, Tour de Meister outlined the exact scenario that we're going through now, where that we're going to eventually enter a phase of nation state adoption. And the game theory kind of implies that it will be the smallest states, those on the fringes of the system, that will be most motivated to enter first, become the first movers. And then it will kind of, at one point, more countries will notice and will enter this race, where it's no longer plebs racing to accumulate Bitcoin, or maybe kind of some hedge funds or companies, but now it's like the countries that are starting to race. So that's incredible that it's actually happening. It looks like 2025 is going to be the year where all of these fireworks happen. So that's crazy. As for Europe and this particular case, what do you guys think? Are the Europeans going to listen to this lady, or are they going to have fun staying poor? What do you think?
I mean, personally, I'll pass it on to Opti. Like, Europe's been one of the most hostile places from a regulatory perspective.
Right.
So, I think you're hearing, multiple countries in the European Union talking about an exit tax, right? And not to mention like the tax system there, it's insane. It's like in some of these countries, you're paying 50 to 60% of your income to the government, which is nuts, right? And of course, like we all know that that's really, really possible through like essentially a centralized control of the money, right? So are these politicians, not necessarily the people, right? But are these politicians going to be willing to give up that amount of power? In the United States, like I think that this recent election, like that's really like it was like a very pivotal moment in American history, and somehow Bitcoin got involved in the conversation, and which was interesting, right? Like we didn't really care about politics, and then all of a sudden, Operation Choke Point 2.0, they started attacking our industry. They forced our hand. And, of course, the opposing political party, they're like, oh, we can get votes from these guys, like, free Ross, right? So it's like they kind of created a situation where, they forced Bitcoiners to become part of the donor class in the United States. I don't see that movement happening in Europe. There's so many awesome Bitcoiners. I spent a month in Europe this year in Bitcoin Amsterdam and Lugano. So many awesome Bitcoiners, so many great Bitcoin companies too. But I don't know. That's a great question, man. Like I don't know, Opti, what do you think? We've been covering this for quite a while now.
Yeah, well, to answer Miljan's question, personally, I don't think they're going to listen to this. I can't pronounce her last name, but Sarah Nafo, I believe, is how you say it. A French member of parliament in the European Union. I don't think anyone's going to listen to her, but it is interesting. Like, if you guys watch the clip, there is, that one like scene move to that lady, and she's like kind of smirking and like agreeing to what she's saying. So I think the signal is spreading. But we've been kind of talking about this a while on the show, especially, 2024 was one of those years where we did see a lot of pushback against the Bitcoin narrative, especially in the US. We, basically uncovered the whole Operation Choke Point 2.0. It's become very obvious. We've been seeing a lot of the stuff coming out of the European Union and all the different states over there. And it seems like they are actively trying to kill entrepreneurs and capitalism and trying to tax unrealized gains. And it seems like I've been saying it on the show all year, essentially. The European Union basically wants to keep their citizens having fun and staying poor. But it is very interesting. It is very interesting to see this Bitcoin conversation happen in Parliament. Like, she sounds exactly the way that we sound on the show. She hit all of the different touch points. Obviously, El Salvador in the beginning. kind of, putting the middle finger to the IMF, talking about the digital euro and how dangerous it is. And even in the tweet that she posted this on with this translated AI video, she said, no to a digital euro and yes to a strategic Bitcoin reserve. And I think that's very interesting of just how quickly the conversation is switching up. Before it was very basically like career suicide to embrace Bitcoin. Now it's the opposite, where if you are actively fighting Bitcoin, as we saw in the US elections, you are not only hurting your chances of maintaining your office, but you're also ostracizing a big voting political cohort out there. And so it is very interesting to see how quickly that Overton window shifts, how quickly the dominoes fall. And just kind of diving into one of the quotes she said, she said, it's time for us to bet on freedom. I don't think I've heard any European politician say anything of that sort in the last couple of years. So it is very interesting that she is at the very least saying this. And like Miljan was saying, that people seem to be applauding and somewhat agreeing to what she's saying. And the last point I want to make is I absolutely love what she was saying about like essentially Bitcoin entrepreneurs. And Nico and I have been saying this forever on the show that, hey, why are we getting, victimized for risking it to save in Bitcoin to try to protect our savings? And then they want to, tax our unrealized gains on Bitcoin because we're the ones that took the risk. We're out here trying to build a new monetary system and we're getting punished for it. It really is not only anti-capitalist, but I would argue like anti-human, anti-progression. Like this is taking us into a situation that is very scary, but I think we are starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel. Just the fact that this conversation happened, the fact that she went out there and has this like very base pro Bitcoin stance in the face of all these people that have been very much anti Bitcoin, especially, she's French and they've been talking very bad about Bitcoin recently. And so it's funny that she's in the EU essentially, slapping the face out of the French parliament and saying like, you guys are backwards here. This is not about trying to stop the Bitcoin movement. It's about embracing the Bitcoin movement because this is how you are going to get ahead in the future. So I'm not that hopeful that other members of the EU Parliament are actually going to listen to this lady. I would obviously hope that they do, because as a Bitcoiner, you understand that, hey, if you embrace Bitcoin, you're going to prosper in the 21st century, and that's what this is all about. Is we just want to maintain our purchasing power. We just want a better money, something that isn't designed to steal from us. And the fact that that's catching on, I think is very hopeful of what Nico always said. Like the Overton window has shifted. People are fundamentally starting to have a new perspective around Bitcoin, and I think, like Miljan was saying, 2025 is going to be an incredible year. Obviously, not just for the Bitcoin price, but for the narrative shift around Bitcoin. That what do we always say? Like, if you don't have Bitcoin, you're not going to succeed in the future. Now it's starting to catch on. And I just love to see it. Like that might be one of the most bullish speeches I've heard from any politician in a long time. Obviously, talking crap about the digital euro, about how dangerous it is, and embracing freedom. Like, we need more politicians like this. Like, we need to push Sarah in the future because she gets it, and I want to see more politicians talking like this.
Yeah, and if she disappears, you know why. Anyways, guys, it's going to be a great show. We're almost at 1,500 live viewers between YouTube and X, another 100 or so watching live on Rumble. We already broke 100 likes. Help us break 200 likes within the first 30 minutes of the show. So if you guys are enjoying the show so far, make sure to smash that like button. Before we jump into today's numbers, I do want to give a very special shout out to Simply Bitcoin's lead sponsor. Of course, I'm talking about Bitcoin Well. Bitcoin Well is the best place to build your automatic self-custody Bitcoin stack. Enable your independence with the fastest and safest way to buy Bitcoin on-chain or via the Lightning Network in Canada or the United States. To get started, you put in your email address and bada bing, bada boom. It takes about 2 to 5 minutes to sign up, and you're ready to buy Bitcoin. What makes Bitcoin Well different is that it's a completely non-custodial platform, meaning as soon as you buy Bitcoin and the funds clear, it goes straight to your self-custody Bitcoin wallet address. Also, if you're a higher net worth individual and you're looking to buy over $50,000 worth of Bitcoin or more, check out their Bitcoin Well Infinite product. It's a white glove experience tailored for, again, if you're trying to buy $50,000 of Bitcoin or more. If you're tired of dealing with UI or terrible customer service like emails and all that stuff, and you want a personal representative of which you can call to buy or sell Bitcoin, you got to go check out Bitcoin Well Infinite. To get started, go to bitcoinwell.com/OTC or send me an email at nico@bitcoinwell.com. Also, check out, every time you buy Bitcoin on Bitcoin Well, you earn Bitcoin Well points, and you can use these points towards the Bitcoin Wishing Well contest. We're going to do it live for you guys right now. Toss a coin into the Wishing Well, scan the QR code, and you have won 500 sats. The first person. You win every time you toss a coin into the Wishing Well, and you have an opportunity to win up to 1 million Satoshis every coin toss. Use promo code SimplyBTC, and you get 3 tosses into the Wishing Well, absolutely free. All right, everybody, let's get to the numbers. We have tons to talk about. I want to tell you guys about our sponsor, Stampseed. Is your Bitcoin in cold storage really secure? Are your seed words really secure? Stampseed's do-it-yourself kit has everything you'll need to hammer your seed words into commercial-grade titanium plates instead of writing them down on paper. Don't do that. Paper sucks. You want to literally stamp your seed into this plate of titanium. Your words are actually stamped into the metal plate with this hammer. So once your words are in, they aren't going anywhere. No risk of the plate breaking apart and your pieces falling everywhere. Titanium stamp seeds will survive nearly triple the heat produced by a house fire. They are also crush-proof, waterproof, non-corrosive, and most importantly, because this is generational wealth, time-proof. All things that paper is not, allowing you to hodl your Bitcoin for the long haul. I mean, here is the plate that they crushed. They put in water, they put a blowtorch to it, and as you can see, the words have survived. Stamp your seed on Stampseed. And you can use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on their store. Head over to Stampseed. All right, everybody. If you want to maintain the relationship with your grandchildren, because eventually you're going to want to pass on your Bitcoin to them, imagine having that conversation when you're 80 years old and they look at you in the eyes and they say, "Grandpapa, do you have my Bitcoin?" And then you're like, "No, I lost it because I wrote down my seed words on paper." Don't put yourself in that situation. Head over to stampseed.com today. Use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off. All right. At the time of recording, the Bitcoin price is $107,360. That sounds really good to say. Block height, 875,183. Sats per dollar, under 1,000, 932. Market cap, 2.13 trillion. Bitcoin versus gold market cap, 11.55%. Percentage issued, 94.27%. Decline from all-time high, -0.9%. Realized monetary inflation, 1.14%. In the grand scheme of things, Bitcoin is just getting started. Anyways, Jack Mahler's had this great conversation with Matt Odell. We have the clip for you guys. We're going to play it, and then we're going to talk about it. Let's check it out.
So they're having fun. They're having fun gapping them over weekends.
No,
right? Like
man, this is not.
You don't think so?
No, this is not odd lot retail traders. Listen, guys, and when people like Peter Schiff says, you know, Bitcoin's a Ponzi, sailors just buying and pushing it to new highs, and everyone's agreed not to sell. No,
So then why are they buying on weekends?
There's just persistent bid under this thing. Someone has mandated an order.
So they're buying it all week, but the float is less on weekends inherently because other traditional markets are closed. So the price tends to run up more during the weekends, even though it's just a consistent bid.
Yeah, well, and just look at the numbers. When people say sailor's the only buyer, no, this thing's doing 60 to $100 billion of 24-hour volume. Sailor's 1 billion of that. Come on, give me a break. And this does not look like, if you want to move a $2 trillion asset, I know we're not gold yet, but we're as big as we're as big as Amazon, Google. You know, do you think odd lot retail would move those things on the weekend? No. You got to have muscle to move this thing. And especially on a Sunday night like that, And it's not just a one-off, because I would agree with you, Matt, if it was like, one leverage liquidation on an exchange that pushed it on a Sunday night. But weekend activity has been fairly consistent. If you guys remember, like the first thrust to and over 100K were also on US nighttime. It's either US nighttime or weekends. That is US banking hours closed. That is someone who's probably wired a ton of money to an order execution, and that's being averaged in, and sometimes liquidity gets dry. I don't know. It looks to me very unique. And anyway,
but so like, let's use this most recent weekend as an example, right? Because to me, this is fascinating, right? That historically global markets close. They're closed as more than they're open. It feels like they're closed more than they're open. They're closed all night. Their trading hours are very tight, and then they're closed on weekends, right? And part of like the whole process and traditions and whatnot of traditional global markets is, for example, the NASDAQ 100, like QQQ and whatnot, like announced MicroStrategy close a business day Friday. Presumably they do that, traditionally speaking, so that it has the least market effect possible. So they announced that, and then markets are closed for 48 hours, right? Almost nearly, like more than that, right? It's like 50 hours or something. And we go up like $7,000. We go up almost 10%. We go up like 7-8% by the time markets open again. We've never seen anything like that. How about the election when Trump won? Bitcoin just starts running, right?
No,
like Bitcoin called the election before CNN called the election. But Bitcoin was the only thing you could trade. Like you couldn't buy Apple stock. Like if you were bullish on Apple stock, you were bullish on like equities because of Trump winning, you just couldn't buy it. Like you could only buy Bitcoin. So to me, it's fascinating seeing Bitcoin become this macro asset. And it's the only thing that's actually 24/7, 365.
All right. I mean, Miljan, who's behind? What? Everyone's laughing. What did I do?
It's just like no one knows. But yeah, ask the
I'm
question.
not going to pretend like that I know who's buying on the weekends, especially with such.
I thought you guys were laughing because I pronounced his name wrong again, and I'm like, God damn it,
you killed it.
Miljan. There we go. See, okay. All right. So same question. Who's buying? Okay, so he said it right. There's $100 billion worth of volume. Sailor's only buying 1 billion out of that. Who's the other people?
Yeah, like I said, I'm not going to pretend that I know who that is. Obviously, there's a big player there, or maybe multitude of bigger players. But the bigger point here is the whole liquidity profile of Bitcoin. So we're talking about maybe $1.5 trillion asset in terms of market cap. I don't know. I don't follow this on a daily basis, and these numbers change quite a bit. But let's say that's the order of magnitude. So maybe 1/10 of gold, much smaller, excuse me, than the U.S. Treasury market. Yet it's starting to compete with those massive markets in terms of liquidity. And the obvious advantage that it has is 24/7 trading. You can't make those trades in treasuries or gold. I mean, especially when it comes to getting custody of physical gold. That's basically impossible. You need the Navy every time you want to take custody, right, of any bigger amount. So what's the takeaway here? What to me the most important thing is that Bitcoin is showing signs of superior liquidity profile to any other asset as its market cap is rapidly growing. And liquidity is king in these types of things. We're talking about network effects. Big players who need to allocate large amounts, they have all these needs to, be able to allocate without moving the price. So I don't think we're there yet. The price just needs to go up 10x or 100x and we'll be fine. But it seems like as we get there, it's obvious that that Bitcoin will have no competition when it comes to liquidity. So exciting times ahead, no question.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you, Miljan, because it's, you know, and Matt really, and he went on a rant at the end, and I love that, right? Which is like, what, you can't just buy Apple. Like, let's say you wake up on Saturday and, you know, you're just like, you know what? I went out last night and I just think Apple's dope because I saw everyone had iPhones and whatever.
Well, how
like,
about, sorry to cut you off, Nico, how about something big and important happened on Saturday? And you, as a market participant, you need to react to that.
Exactly.
So what are your chances? What are your options? Bitcoin is the only option.
Bitcoin's the only. That's so true. That's a really, really good point, right? Like, yeah, something bad news happens, right? And you're like, oh
Good
my
news,
God,
who
you
knows?
know, good news, exactly. And it's just like frozen, you know. And then, you know, what's also really interesting, I'm really glad that you brought that up, is the circuit breakers, right? In the stock market, right? So like if a stock has volatility of more, what is it, like 15% or something? Like they just turn off. As Bitcoiners, we're just like, what does that even mean? How is that even possible? You know, so I feel like, and it's actually like Jeff Booth that talks about this, right? Like Bitcoin is really the only thing that is accurately portraying market prices and market signals. Everything else is manipulated. Everything else, the government or the state, they have their hands on it. They manipulate it. Bitcoin is the only thing that's properly reflecting the markets, and not only the markets, but also properly reflecting what Jeff Booth makes the case for, which is that the world should be naturally deflationary because of all the technological innovation and the productivity gains. But we're not seeing any of that unless you're on a Bitcoin standard. If you're on a Bitcoin standard, you're like, oh my God, my life is getting cheaper. You know, I just gotta work and save, and you know, I'll be able to live the life that I want to live. But if you're on a fiat standard, it's all darkness. It's nihilism. You don't see any of that. So, Miljan, I don't know if you want to add to that. If not, we'll pass it on to Opti.
Let's hear from Opti.
Let's go. So I think, like Miljan was saying, I think the big picture here is essentially, I think it was ODELL who said it, that Bitcoin is becoming that macro asset. As we've seen in previous cycles, it was completely, you know, pushed up by retail. And as Jack Mallers was kind of talking about, this isn't odd lot traders, as he was saying. Like, this isn't just retail that is buying Bitcoin to push the price up. Because, you know, even yesterday, I was still thinking Bitcoin was a $1 trillion market cap, even though now we're at 2. And the Bitcoin, you know, the Bitcoin price moves so quickly sometimes that you are still using old metrics. But when you kind of frame it like Jack Mallers was saying, you know, $2 trillion market cap is essentially like Amazon or something like that. And odd lot or retail aren't the ones that are going to be moving the price up right now. And so as you can see, there is some very big buyers in Bitcoin, and we can all speculate on who that is. As we've been covering the last couple of weeks, it could be some of the biggest nations in the world. Like, it could be Russia. It could be China. It could be, you know, people in the Middle East. Like, we've seen a lot of conversation happening, a lot of leak rumors coming around that, hey, these strategic Bitcoin reserve bills or conversations are happening, and it's being taken very seriously. And one of the things that I always loved about bull markets was the weekend pump. So, you know, Wall Street checks out at 5 p.m. Eastern time. The price starts pumping. It pumps all weekend, and then Monday it just dumps. And those were like the glorious days of the Bitcoin bull markets, where you're like, yeah, Wall Street traders are getting wrecked. And now we're seeing that it's kind of back on the table, and you just love to see it. And really kind of like diving down into the numbers here, you know, a lot of people have been joking or maybe very seriously saying the meme of, hey, Saylor, can you buy some more Bitcoin so you can pump the price, please? And, you know, Saylor's been buying billions of dollars of Bitcoin. But as Jack Mallers was kind of pointing out, Saylor's basically 1% of the buying pressure right now. So there is some people out there, and we'll probably figure out soon enough, but some very deep pockets that want to get a position in Bitcoin. And, you know, if Saylor's only a small fish in that conversation, if it is 60 billion, 100 billion of buying buying pressure and sailors only buying 1 billion. Like there is a big amount of money that is trying to get into Bitcoin. And I'm sure soon enough we'll figure out who that is. But the point remains the same, that as Odell was talking about, as Maulers was kind of saying, as we've been saying, Bitcoin is that macro asset, 24/7, 365 liquidity. You can trade it all day, all night. And now everyone is kind of waking up to it. And if we really kind of connect that to the original clip that we played of the French lady in Parliament saying, guys, we need to embrace freedom. Like Bitcoin is the only real-time metric, the only real-time free market liquidity asset in the world. And people are waking up to this. And this is the main selling point. It's really funny when you kind of hear people like no coiners talk about Bitcoin. They're like, oh, what's the use case of Bitcoin? And you're like, I don't know, maybe a money, maybe a market that isn't controlled, that is 24/7, global, so that everyone, once they tap into that network, they can have real-time signal of what's going on in the global market. And we're seeing that that's happening right now. So as we've been talking about on the show all year, now that institutional capital is here, now that this is a conversation that's happening on the nation state level, it is truly becoming a global asset or a global, macro money, which is what Bitcoin was designed in the first place. This is a global money, not controlled by anyone. It's neutral money, neutral global money right now. And you're seeing that people are starting to wake up to that. So who is that, extra $59 billion of buying pressure right now? We have no clue, but it's most likely either a lot of billionaires or a couple of nation states that are bidding for a Bitcoin position. So I'm sure we'll figure it out. Maybe it's even the US now. Like we have no clue right now. Like we have no clue what's happening. Maybe it's what do you like to call it, Nico, since we are on YouTube, the administrative state, the DS,
dude, bro, listen, this is, you guys are, look, we all know who it is. Chrissy Lagarde is buying all the Bitcoin. She's buying it all. She's like, you know what? I've lost, we're just going to buy it before they end the central bank, and then the central banks all own all the Bitcoin. Could be a possibility. Like that's a lot of Bitcoin. In the comment, that's a lot of Bitcoin, and just no one knows who it is. But anyways, it's a great clip from Maulers and from Odell. But we're gonna get to the news. We have tons to talk about, some interesting tweets, and then guys, we're gonna talk about, during the culture segment, we're gonna talk about Nostr, and we're gonna talk about Primal. We're gonna take advantage of the fact that we have Miljan here, the CEO of Primal. Love the app, by the way. We're gonna talk a lot more about that. So stay tuned. We will be right back. What just happened? That was weird.
I want to give a very special shout out to our sponsor, Compass Mining. They make Bitcoin mining accessible to everyone, from beginners to experienced investors. Their turnkey miners gets you online and hashing within 48 hours, making it easier than ever to start your mining journey. Plus, with their active marketplace, you can resell your miner at any time, adding flexibility and value to your investment. Visit their website to access a wealth of resources, learning everything you need to know about Bitcoin mining. Take your first step into the world of Bitcoin mining with confidence. Discover more at compassmining.io. Again, compassmining.io, and see how Compass Mining can power your success. I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Foundation. It's self-custody done right. They built a premium grade hardware wallet called Passport right here in the US, and it integrates seamlessly with their free app called Envoy. Passport is fully open source and verifiable. It's the most intuitive Bitcoin wallet designed with a UX reminiscent of a classic feature phone, so you'll know how to navigate it and use it the moment you pick it up. It's also air-gapped, meaning Bitcoin stays offline, never touching an internet connection. It's Bitcoin only, open source verifiable, air-gap security model, gorgeous design craft, premium grade materials. Get your Bitcoin off exchanges and into your own hands in just a few minutes with Passport at foundation.xyz/simply. Get peace of mind for your peace.
All right, this is Opti, and he's not placing a phone call. He's actually holding the passport by Foundation Devices. Not your keys, not your cheese. This is a perfect gift to give to somebody that perhaps is a little bit intimidated by self-custody. Passport doesn't sacrifice convenience for security. It's completely air-gapped, completely open source. Take control of your Bitcoin by taking self-custody. We recommend the Passport by Foundation Devices. If you use promo code SIMPLY, it won't get you Opti, but it will get you a discount to the Passport by Foundation Devices. Anyways, let's get to today's news. I saw this post. It's not a tweet anymore, I guess, by Michelle Weekly, and big fan of hers. She has some great takes, and I found this really interesting. And again, this is kind of, I'm gonna connect this with what we were talking about with the politician and her speech in the beginning, right? So, I think politicians and governments, they get a tremendous amount of power from having a monopoly on money. And I think that they're able to control people in ways. And I think that they're able to redistribute wealth in a lot of ways as well, right? Not only via direct taxation, but also taxation via monetary debasement, taxation via inflation as well. And I think that Bitcoin, maybe not income tax. I don't want to go down that route because, it's in law. People agreed to it. It's a social contract. It's very, it's a hot button issue. I have my personal feelings about it, and I'm sure all of us do. We're Bitcoiners, right? But, it's in law, right? But the other, form of taxation, which is not agreed upon, in my opinion, no one really agreed to inflation. That's just something that the government or the central bank treats it as if, it's a fact of nature, so to speak. They get a huge portion of their revenue from that. The United States last year in 2023, they spent $1.7 trillion more than they collected in tax revenue. How did they do that? How did they do that deficit spending? They just printed the difference, right? And that ain't free. That ain't free. We all pay for that, right? It's just people are just not aware of this. Now, why am I bringing all this up? I'm giving a little bit of context because essentially within the Bitcoin system, you're escaping that system. You're escaping a system that it essentially needs you, right? I love the quote from the Sovereign Individual, right? Where it basically says that the state sees its citizens like tax cattle, and now the internet or information technologies is going to give the tax cattle wings, right? So the natural evolution of this is, I think eventually there is going to be some type of clash. I think we saw little glimpses of that with the Operation Choke Point 2.0, the attack on self-custody, Wallet of Satoshi leaving the United States, Phoenix Wallet leaving the United States. Shout out to Zeus. Primal, you guys stuck around as well. You guys have a great Lightning wallet. But, we were in this regulatory uncertainty last year because there was a lot of hostility coming from the current administration, which is, they're basically out of office, out of power January 20th when the Trump administration gets sworn in. And hopefully, Trump keeps his promise and the regulatory environment improves. But when I see stuff like this, it just like it I have that little feeling in the back of my mind, like, oh my God, like, are things really, really changing? So what am I talking about? So Michelle Weekly posted this, and it goes on to say, new IRS regulations are on the way for Bitcoin, complicating reporting even further. Essentially, before 2025 begins, the IRS wants Bitcoin holders to allocate their cumulative cost basis of their assets among designated wallets. Now, that word worries me. What do you mean designated wallets, right? Like, what does that mean, right? That's like an invented term. It reminds me of the term hosted wallet and unhosted wallet, right? Just these terms that like bureaucrats had to make up to basically make self-custody abnormal, to make it to essentially demonize it in a way. Words are very powerful. Anyways, it goes on to say they're requesting this in anticipation of a new accounting method which mandates that gains/losses on Bitcoin is calculated independently in distinct wallets. This new rule is rolling out in tandem with a new tax form called the 1099-DA, which will be filled by exchanges/brokers to report details of client gains/losses to the IRS. As we anticipate, they're going to make the administrative burden on using Bitcoin as currency ever more difficult. They're effectively discouraging self-custody and privacy with these kinds of regulations. These new regulations will result in more exchange power and centralization, less privacy, and more overhead for those who want to use Bitcoin legally as a currency. Also to note, the IRS has begun to integrate AI into their review of tax returns and blockchain activity. The walls closing in, gentlemen. Now, what's really interesting, and I think it's going to be better under the Trump administration, is my question is look, you don't pay capital gains if let's say I go from the United States and I go to Europe and I convert my dollars to euros. You don't pay capital gains on that, right? Why do I have to pay capital gains on Bitcoin, right? Like if it's a currency and I'm using it as a currency, why is it treated, why do I have to pay on that? And then there's already countries that have already declared it legal tender, like El Salvador, right? And this is actually something that Trump has even brought up, like Trump verbatim, and we've read you guys this quote in the past. He's like, if Bitcoin is a currency, like why do people have to pay capital gains on that? That doesn't make any sense, right? So, and then you kind of have to go down the rabbit hole, like why is this happening? Why are they doing these types of things? Well, because Bitcoin is outside the current system. And because it's outside of the current system, they can't enforce the way that they used to enforce laws in the previous system, which they had total control over, right? So, it's a brave new world. I think that this is going to be an interesting, heated topic and discussion over the next 5 to 10 years. The theory of the case that we've been making on the show for the last 2 or 3 years is that what I was calling the great disintermediation. I believe that social media, social media and protocols like Nostr, it has disintermediated information, right? People no longer trust the so-called mainstream media. They're not mainstream media anymore. They're legacy media. You have Elon on X basically saying we are the media now. So that disintermediation has happened. But look at all the things that have happened to get to that point, right? There was discovery that essentially that elements of the US government were putting pressure on X and pressure on a lot of these platforms to censor information, which is nuts, completely against the First Amendment. Now, what I think the next step is, so the disintermediation of information started, right? I think it's like we've went over the hump on that end. But what I don't think we have even discussed, I don't think we have even started this, is the disintermediation of money. And I think we're in like the first innings of that process. Now, the difference between information and money is a much bigger difference. Look at how much, even in the United States, where you have First Amendment protections, look at how much the government fought to keep control of the narrative. Before social media, there was a handful of legacy media outlets, so-called gatekeepers of information, of which you can put pressure on to control the narrative. The American public was sold that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction in 2003. If social media existed back then, we would have individuals, citizens would have the ability to rebuke that in real time. We didn't have the ability back then. There was a handful of channels, there was a handful of newspapers, and we trusted them. But I think what the internet has shown over the last 10 years is, are these people really journalists? Like, it's pretty crazy that just, two guys have decided a YouTube channel are a lot of the time more accurate than a lot of these journalists, and this is why I believe you've seen the rise of independent media so fast and so hard. It's not a coincidence that Joe Rogan is the most popular broadcaster on the face of the planet. That's not a coincidence. It's not legacy media anymore. And of course, that puts, people that want to control the truth in a bind. Now, what I think is coming, over the next 5 to 10 years is that same process that we went with information, we're going to go through with money. The difference between the two is that their control of money is their source of power. Their control of money is their source of funding. And essentially, we're knocking on the door and we're basically saying, like, hey, man, we're going to change some things here. Things are going to be differently. Like, it is completely naive to think they're just going to hand over the keys and go willingly into that good night. That's not going to happen, right? So, what I think is optimistic, and I would not have been able to tell you this a year ago, is this recent election and the game theory that's starting to play in. You have a pro-Bitcoin administration going into the White House. So for all the people that gave us crap for talking about politics for like 6 months, we're like, guys, like, we don't want to talk about this, but like, unfortunately, we all want to live in the world of the sovereign individual where politics are irrelevant. They don't matter. We're not at that world yet. And unfortunately, fiat politics matter these days. They still do. And I think they're going to matter for the foreseeable future. While we're in this transitionary phase, I think it's important to keep on top of all that. So anyways, Miljan, you're a Bitcoin entrepreneur. You've developed this amazing app, that does multiple things. So I'm sure that these are, topics that you spend time thinking about, and because you have to be able to kind of navigate this as a Bitcoin business owner.
Yeah, definitely. I think about these topics a lot as a Bitcoin entrepreneur, but also as a Bitcoiner. So what you outlined there is some potentially onerous rules being set up related to, tracking capital gains in Bitcoin and so forth. That's interesting. It looks like it's a remnant of the current administration that's on its way out, based on how hostile it is to Americans, essentially, to American Bitcoiners. But it's interesting how this jurisdictional arbitrage or jurisdictional game theoretic battle is already unfolding between countries when it comes to even things like capital gains. You have some countries, and I think there are some countries in Europe, actually, I think it was Czech Republic, if I'm not mistaken, that had announced that they're removing capital gains on Bitcoin if you hold it for longer than 3 years. So that's interesting. I think there's some favorable tax treatment in Portugal and other countries as well. And then of course there's El Salvador, where Bitcoin is legal tender, which means that you have to treat it as a currency, and therefore there's no capital gains on currency. So how interesting that this game theory of this kind of battle between countries and kind of the way the world will look like on an unfolding Bitcoin standard was really defined over a decade before Bitcoin was invented. I'm of course referring to the Sovereign Individual book that you mentioned previously. They have foreseen all of this. And to me, that's one of the most impressive books I've ever read. These guys were able to create a model of the world based on their understanding of history, philosophy, monetary economics, etc., etc., and then project using the same model that essentially says that the entire society is basically built on the logic of violence. There's like a fundamental kind of law. There's a fundamental situation on the ground at any given point, and then all the laws and rules and the culture is built on top of that. But when the fundamentals change, for example, when the discovery of gunpowder changed the society entirely, because the fundamentals are different. Now, nobody was talking about all men being created equal in medieval times. That was obviously silly, because one knight in an armor could plow through a whole village, right? But when gunpowder was invented, a farmer could defend his farm with a rifle on relatively equal terms, and then everything changes. And now we have another fundamental change, and that was foreseen by the sovereign individual, basically a cryptographically controlled currency that's outside of the domain of countries. So once we have that, once that exists, everything changes. And then they had foreseen in quite a bit of detail of how exactly this is going to play out. And I'm amazed to actually watch it play out. And I think they actually identified the 20s. It's been a few years since I read the book, but I think they said the 2020s is the decade where this will actually unfold. This shift will happen. They said these will be dangerous times. Be very careful during that times, because the governments are still going to continue to try to hold on to the power that they have desperately, using any means available. So, of course, one needs to be careful when navigating these times. But I don't know how much this answers your question. I just find the whole we're here for one of the biggest shows maybe in the history of mankind. It's happening in the 2020s. It's the moment when humans discover digital scarcity and are monetizing that digitally scarce commodity in real time. And it's every bit as chaotic as you would expect a process like that to be.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, those are my thoughts.
100%. And just watching them, come to terms with like, oh my God, this thing isn't going away. It's just glorious to watch, right? These people, thought that they were all powerful, and in a way they still are. They hold the monopoly on violence, right? They can go after one individual, but good luck with the decentralization. Good luck. And they don't know how to deal with it, right? So it's fascinating to watch it unfold. Opti, what's your take before we hit the culture to talk about Nostr and Primal?
Yeah, I mean, was just going to basically echo what Miljan was saying, that it does definitely seem like a remnant of the current Biden administration. And so hopefully we see some change in 2025 with a new administration coming in, and obviously a more pro-Bitcoin stance. And like Miljan was saying, the interesting part going on right now is the jurisdictional arbitrage that we're seeing pop up around the world, like he's, was mentioning Czech Republic, Portugal. And it really goes into the Bitcoin thesis that where Bitcoin is treated correctly or the best, that's where capital is going to flow. So if America really does want to maintain its position as a leader in the world, they're going to have to treat Bitcoin favorably. But obviously, it's a two-sided coin here because they probably do have the most to lose, considering that the dollar is the world reserve currency. And of course, they're trying to do their best to implement some form of capital controls here, because I think what we've been kind of seeing all year long is, I think in the beginning of the year, a lot of Bitcoiners were saying that, oh, the powers that be, they don't understand Bitcoin. Look how silly they look talking about Bitcoin. And as the years progressed, you start to recognize that I think they very clearly understand what the stakes are right now, and they're doing their best to try to stop the adoption of Bitcoin. Now, with all that being said, I was reminded of a tweet by Bitstein, and he was just quoting Hal Finney. And this is a Hal Finney quote, and he said this in 2011. And I think it's very fitting to relay the same message here today with this segment. So again, Hal Finney on the Bitcoin forum or Bitcoin Talk forums, he goes, every day that goes by and Bitcoin hasn't collapsed due to legal or technical problems, that brings new information to the market. It increases the chance of Bitcoin's eventual success and justifies a higher price. And I think this is kind of what we're seeing right now, that as we've been covering all 2024 with Operation Choke Point 2.0, etc., the fact that we know they've been attacking the on and off ramps, and now with this kind of new legislation being pushed through, or at least attempted to be pushed through, you're seeing that right now they're kind of realizing that they can't actually stop Bitcoin, the network. And so now they're trying to take a legal route to stop Bitcoin adoption or the use of Bitcoin. And like Miljan was saying, I think that is going to be, and Nico, you said it as well, I think that's going to be the next fight. And hey, I mean, I guess as Bitcoiners, we just got to buckle up. Like it's coming.
I mean, simplemente Bitcoin, right? We're going to just El Salvador, baby. But anyways, guys, stay tuned. We're going to talk about Nostr, all things Nostr. We're going to talk about Primal during the culture segment. So stay tuned. We will be right back.
I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, HIVE Digital Technologies. As the first ever public miner, HIVE's been battle tested through every possible market. And as the first with an AI strategy, HIVE continues to redefine the future of sustainable energy. Also, gotta casually drop this in here, HIVE consistently tops the industry in Bitcoin mined per exahash. They're lean and mean, they're green and clean, and they're changing the game. Learn more by following them at HIVE Digital Tech or check out their website, hivedigitaltech.com.
All right, everybody, before we hit the culture, I do want to give a shout out to our sponsor, BitBlockBoom. It's going to be one of the best Bitcoin conferences of the year. It's April 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th. The entire Simply Bitcoin crew is going to be there. Opti, Nico, Dante, Rustin, Jacob, the Twitter Zoomer crew, Sophie, and much more. Guys, this is one of the best Bitcoin conferences of the year. It's one of my personal favorites. It's actually the first conference where me and Opti met each other in person. The conference isn't too big where you get lost in the sauce. It isn't too small. It's just the right size so that you can network with your favorite Bitcoiners. If you're trying to get a job in the industry, this is one of the best conferences to go to. I highly, highly recommend it. Again, it's going to be in Dallas, Texas, April 3rd through the 6th. And you want to get your tickets quickly because the prices do go up. If you use promo code BBB21, you got $100 off your tickets. All right, I do want to open the conversation. Want to take advantage of the fact that we have Miljan in the house. You know, guys, I have to give a little bit of context here. So simply, you know, we're a media only play. We're a media business, right? And you know, we're video focused, right? And the reality is that if you want to build, you know, a video media play, there's very limited options. You kind of have to you have to use YouTube, and I'm a big fan of YouTube, and a big fan of Rumble, and I'm a big fan of X. But you know, the reality is that they're platforms. You don't like. It is what it is, you know, and I'm very thankful. And I grew up with these platforms and I love these platforms. But as I was mentioning in the previous segment, you know, these platforms, because people are moving away from the media and the political discussion is happening on these platforms, politics is starting to get involved, right? So, you know, even platforms like X, right, which is under the leadership of Elon Musk, is not immune to this, right? And I always had a Nostr account. I posted on Nostr, but I truly didn't value it until Simply Bitcoin went through our deplatforming scare. And, you know, thankful to all the community and the Forbes article and the Zero Hedge article, all the attention that we got, we were able to cause enough of a commotion where, you know, where we were able to get our channel back, and we're thankful for the community and we're thankful for Team YouTube for making that happen. But at the same time, that's where something snapped into my head as a kind of Bitcoin media entrepreneur, whatever you want to call it. And I said, oh my God, like this might not have the volume, but I feel like it's my responsibility to, you know, start pushing forward protocols like Nostr and start promoting protocols like Nostr. So since that day, since that week, and I do want to give a shout out to because you walked me through this when I was like messaging everywhere. I was posting on Primal left and right, like, guys, how do you upload on here? I was sending you messages, and you know, of course, the community was so awesome, and they were able to answer my noob questions. I'm a media guy. I'm not a tech guy. And ever since that week, we have started posting our links from Rumble, and also we've been using a service called Zap.Stream. And you know, me and Miljan, we had a conversation regarding you know, uploading our content directly, and I know that's a feature that you guys recently added, right? The ability to upload content. So yeah, man, it's you don't truly appreciate it until you need it, right? And the way that I see Nostr is it's like the Alamo, bro. It's the Alamo, right? It's like the it's the only place on the internet where you will find true free speech. Very similar to Bitcoin in the sense that you're going to have to be okay with your worst enemy using Bitcoin, right? You're not going to be able to censor them. You're not going to be able to deplatform them. You're not going to be able to stop them from speaking. Nostr is like that evolution, but and this is just one use case. There's many use cases, but where we are right now in the Nostr story, um, what we're seeing is essentially these social media apps built on top of the Nostr protocol, right? And I really ask you guys, like, go check it out. Go check it out. It is awesome, and the zapping is so cool, and you feel a little bit differently because it's not really algorithmic in the sense. So with X, it's like designed to infuriate you or something, right? You go on Nostr and you'll see this from a lot of people like myself. Like I don't care what I post on Nostr. Like I'll just wake up and be like, it's a beautiful sunset or it's a beautiful thing. I was on the beach yesterday, just posted a picture of me on the beach, the sunrise, the sunrise here in Miami. It's beautiful. And I just posted that. I would never post that on Twitter, right? So, it's a totally different experience. I highly recommend it. And of course, Nostr is this, open protocol, so anyone could build on top of it. Primal is one of those applications. I don't know if that's the correct term, Miljan, but one of those companies that really, really jumped in there and they've built this awesome product. It's so great to use. It's my daily driver, not only for the Nostr protocol, but also for my Lightning wallet. I love it. It's awesome. If you want to zap me, Nico@primal.net. It's dope. Big fan. So anyways, I wanted to give a little bit of context, Miljan, because perhaps our audience is not well versed in this. But dude, it's an honor to have you on the show. And like I said, it's a huge fan of what you guys have been building.
Well, thanks very much for that. Again, thanks for having me on the show. Yeah, I think everybody watching this show understands the importance of decentralized money. We all understand that all the perils of having the money printer be in control of any human, right? Humans can't really be trusted with a money printer, as Saifedean eloquently put many years ago, and then had like a long and detailed explanation around it in his many books. And we can think of Nostr as a parallel to that, but instead of money, we're talking about our online presence, our online speech, all the content that we post online really shouldn't be in control of anyone other than the user itself. So the legacy platforms like X, Facebook, etc., Reddit, and all of the kind of mainstream social media apps and other apps essentially are walled gardens, fully controlled by the company, or in some cases by one person, right? And as you know, the virtues of the person or the company that controls this could be, judged differently by different people. You might like Elon, you might not like him. The fact is that this capability of having a global town square, which is what humanity needs, shouldn't be controlled by anyone and shouldn't be controllable by anyone. Something like this should be governed by a decentralized protocol that is open, that everyone has the same sort of rights on, both in terms of participation as a user, as well as the ability to develop and kind of stand up products and services on top of the open protocol without seeking permission. So these types of concepts are very familiar to Bitcoiners. We're essentially applying those same types of concepts to the wider internet. So Bitcoin is enabling us to decentralize money. And Nostr, in my view, is by far the best protocol for enabling us to decentralize everything else. And so I don't know if you have specific questions or if you want me to kind of dive into any of the aspects of Nostr. I don't want to ramble on forever.
Yeah, no,
that was
yeah,
phenomenal.
I do have a question, and then we can, let the conversation go where it goes. But before the show started, I asked you, what do you want to talk about? Like, obviously, we're going to talk about why you built Primal, and you literally just said, like, it's not about Primal. I really want to spread the awareness of Nostr. So, on that mission, I want to ask you the question: why will Nostr win?
I think openness of the network is what's ultimately going to enable Nostr to win. And I'll kind of clarify that. So Nostr has all of these kind of self-sovereign properties, censorship resistance. Each user holds the keys to their speech. So on Nostr, you have your key pair, just like you do on Bitcoin. You have your public key or private key. And then every user is fully in control over their identity, over all of the content that they publish. So self-sovereignty and censorship resistance are kind of baked into the protocol at the kind of fundamental level. But the reality is that most people don't really care about that. We Bitcoiners are in a minority currently. And what's going to bring the majority of the people out there to Nostr, I think, is high quality applications and high quality content. And the reason why I'm convinced that this is going to happen on Nostr is, again, the openness of the network, where anyone is able to join, anyone is able to build a product on it. And every new builder that creates a new product type, let's say we recently added a support for long form content on Nostr. So this is like a Substack / Medium competitor. All of the long form content that's being published on Nostr is open for anyone to access and build user experiences around. So let's say if you currently in Primal, you have access to kind of social media, kind of microblogging feeds, very similar to Twitter, but there's a different tab that says reads, and you have the feed of long form content. And then as you interact with this content, you might highlight a piece of text and then post that in your social media feed. All of these events, like the highlight itself, are publicly accessible events that you that get published to the public Nostr relay network, and they're accessible for anyone, any developer, to build any sort of user experience around. So currently there are hundreds and hundreds of projects that are just standing up products and services and building on this open network. And essentially, it's up to each developer individually to decide what kind of experience they're going to create on this network, how to put these artifacts together in a new way, perhaps. And as new types of apps get developed, more content types get added to the network, further increasing the kind of versatility of the clients and kind of the abundance of content, bringing in more users. And then every app developer, every product developer will do their own promotion to promote their product, again, bringing more users to not just their product, but the entire Nostr network. And when these kind of network effects play out over time, it's inevitable that the amount of gravity that Nostr is going to be able to create will eventually attract everyone. So I have no doubt that in the long run, everything moves to Nostr. And it might sound a little bit crazy maybe at this time, at the size of this network, but I think similarly to Bitcoin in 2011 and 2012, we were discussing earlier in the show, when some of the Bitcoin thinkers like Tour de Mister were like talking about the Bitcoin game theory, and that eventually it will bring in everyone, including nation states. That statement was laughable at the time.
For sure.
Almost everyone laughed at this, but look at where we are now. I think a similar type of thing is happening on Nostr and is going to continue to unfold on Nostr. And I think we all have a great opportunity to participate in something really special at such an early stage.
Yeah, absolutely, and I definitely see that. and it's extremely exciting. And I want like everyone to kind of understand, like it's an open protocol, right? So you can build any type of custom, like like there is no limit, right? And you're tapping into the same community, right? So there's so many like Bitcoin entrepreneurs that are approaching this differently. And the I don't think we've even seen the potential of what these apps are going to do. And because it's an open protocol, what they're going to be able to do much more than the current kind of centralized platforms that we have today, which again, like Miljan, to kind of echo what you were saying, like it's so hard to envision that because this is like, Bitcoin 2011, it's like Nostr 2024, but I think in 10 years, it's going to be like, oh, like no crap, like no, that was obvious, right? So, and I think there's so much fertile ground for entrepreneurs and for users too. And I'm just kind of going down this rabbit hole. And for me, again, like I'm a media person, so I'm like, how do I upload videos? And I think me and you had a conversation while the channel was banned, and we were just talking about it, right? And that is a perfect kind of segue to the recent update that you guys had, which is Primal 2.0. And I believe it added a lot of possibilities. Opti, if you could pull up the screen. It added a lot of functionality, better said. And I was taking a look at it, and you guys have the capability of uploading video content now. Is that correct?
Yes, that capability has been there for a little while. It's not new to the 2.0 release. If you want to bring something up, I think on our download page we have like a nice kind of video overview of what the product does, like in maybe 60 seconds or so. So maybe that will help the audience kind of get a taste for what we're talking about. But the 2.0 release added, so if you go to the download page on the left there, you should be able to...
on the left, Opti.
Oh, sorry. I thought you pulled it up. All right, here we go.
Yeah, and if you full screen that.
Okay.
Unnecessarily.
1 second.
Right there. Boom, boom.
It's down.
Super cool, man.
Appreciate that.
That is that's awesome. You guys did a great job on the video as well. Happy music. Yeah, man, that's really cool. And I like one of the things too that I love, Miljan, is the zap, because zaps are better than likes. All right, they just feel better. Get that little haptic feedback, and you're getting money. And I'm telling you, like I think like my basic zap right now is like 69 sats because I think it's funny. But I know like 10 years from now, I'll be like, dude, I was sending $70 to people. What the F was I thinking? And then you have like some of like the kind of Nostr heavyweights that have massive followings. They're sending thousands of sats left and right. You're going to look back on that, 10 years from now, very similar to how we were looking back at the Pizza story, from 2011, 2010. So Opti's like, I'm not sending zaps.
I'm saying nay on how you say pizza, but keep it going.
Oh, okay. Making fun of my Miami accent. That's fine. But yeah, no, it's interesting. Anyways, Miljan, do you have anything else to add about Primal 2.0, about Nostr? There's currently 2,000 people watching live right now. The floor is yours.
Appreciate it. Yeah, the zaps that you mentioned, I think there's a meme on Nostr started by Gigi a little while ago. He said, like, let's zap so hard that all our grandkids will think we're retarded. So we know what we're doing it anyway. But yeah, just to back up. So Primal, you can think of Primal as Twitter, Substack, and Venmo built into one application, but built on open protocols, built on Nostr and Bitcoin, of course. And yeah, everybody should try it out. Primal.net, you can get the apps or use the web app. The zaps are very, very interesting. That's quite an interesting invention, and I think it's unique to Nostr in this particular kind of flavor that we have, where instead of, like you said, likes are cheap. Anybody can press the like button, but you're sending some value to not only reward the content creator, but also to send some signal to the network regarding what you think of this particular content. And that can be used as a content discovery mechanism to surface higher signal content to those users out there. So we're only scratching the surface of what can be done with this protocol. We're currently still at the stage of implementing the most obvious things. Like, obviously, we need like global town square. We need a space for long form content and video content and all of that. So that's currently being built out. But I think we're currently at the stage. You talked about our conversation a little while ago where you were having trouble uploading video content. Like, not long ago, Nostr was unusable. Now it's quite usable, I would say. In many cases, we have reached, or in some cases even surpassed, the user experience of the legacy platforms. For example, a feed marketplace would be something that's unique to Nostr. Since this is an open network, anyone can create and publish a feed. And we've noticed this kind of organically emerging on the network. And then we at Primal decided to lean into it. And in the 2.0 release, we've built this feed marketplace user interface into the client itself, where you can browse different feeds. You can preload them, preview them, and then add them to your home screen if you wish, and kind of reorganize the order of feeds and kind of swipe left and right between them. And then you can set any one of those feeds to be your main feed. And as you open Primal, you could be loading content that's not served by Primal at all, served by someone else. And then all of the feeds that we create, we also publish to the feed marketplace for other Nostr apps to be able to consume. So we have users of Primal content that are not using Primal apps at all. So when you play this out, you can kind of see, like, this is early days, but this is vastly superior to the closed platforms that we're competing with. So I hope that people will check this stuff out and join us on Nostr.
Absolutely, guys. Go check it out. Again, there's different apps, there's different whatever. It's kind of like different Bitcoin wallets. It's very similar, right? I'm like people like Sparrow. I'm an Electrum junkie. Maybe it's just because of when I got into Bitcoin. I love Electrum, right? So it's like whatever is your flavor of ice cream, whatever you'd like. I love Primal. Personally, that's my daily driver. I love the Lightning wallet that's integrated in it too. But there's also awesome other apps that that are built on top of Nostr too, right? So go check it out. Highly recommend it. What's happening on Nostr is incredible, and I'm super, super excited about the future. Anyways, guys, that was our show for December 17, 2024. I'm your host, Nico. It's my legendary co-host, Optimus Fields, and our special guest today, founder and CEO of Primal.net, Miljan. Go check it out. Go check out Primal 2.0. And guys, we will see you guys tomorrow. Take care, everybody.
Today's episode was brought to you by BitcoinWell.com, a Bitcoin-only platform on a mission to enable financial independence.